I'm a cop, and my knives were used to kill my daughter. By Mario Luigi. I didn't do it. That's what I've been thinking to myself for the past 40 years or so. I didn't do a thing, but yet someone did. Someone did it. Something yet to be explained. So, it's the 1970s. I just got home from investigating a murder. It's pretty simple stuff. A girl gets murdered, her scalp gets removed. Pretty gruesome stuff, but for my job, it's par for the course. I'm not going to beat around the bush and pretend like it's some big mystery. You read the title. I was a cop. I have been for 10 years. I love my job, despite the peculiarities of the job. Now, I've seen plenty of paranormal crap, and maybe I can tell you the story someday, but none of it has been as personal as this was. It started with my knives starting to vanish. Now, you may be thinking, what does vanishing knives have to do with a horrific murder? Well, it didn't at first. It was just a massive inconvenience. First time I really noticed was because it was Thanksgiving and I was trying to get a knife to cut the turkey. I go to the drawer and there's pretty much just 2 knives left. Now, I'm going to be 100% honest here. I hadn't been paying much attention up until this point, but then I saw it and I realized the knives were gone. I looked everywhere, but I couldn't find the damn knife. It was at that point in which I started to replace the knives, only for a few of them to go missing a few minutes later, with my back turned. To this day, I have no idea what the hell it was. At that point, my daughter was around 5. Thus, it's reasonable to say she could have taken them without knowing what it was. Perhaps she thought it was a childish game. I went to ask her, calmly. I know I shouldn't, given the situation after all. My 5-year-old daughter probably has the knives. Cecile, can you please give me my knives back? Cecile looked at me with a confused look. Knives, Daddy? What are knives? I simply replied, the little sharp things, the one with the handles on them. I went to grab one. I grabbed one of the few knives I still had in my drawer and returned. Like this. They're dangerous, so I need them back. Have you seen any of these? No. I've seen the sharp man take one, though. At this point, I was confused. She never mentioned this imaginary friend before. This sounds like some horror movie villain. The Sharp Man? The Sharp Man. He's funny. He's got black clothing on and a weird mask, but most importantly, he's covered in knives. He says he's friendly, but he can't show himself to you. He says you'll be mad. He says I need to keep him a secret. Well, darling, I can assure you that the Sharp Man isn't real. Now I'll ask again. Where did you put them? I don't have them. The Sharp Man does. Now, I knew this conversation wasn't going anywhere, and pressing her harder wasn't going to accomplish anything. So I took a step back and left the room. I went to find the knives in her room. They weren't there. And I swear, I could hear her say, the man is mad at you. He says you were somewhere you shouldn't have been. Now, this is weird. She should have no knowledge about Harmony Way or any of the goings-on in that area. Neither should any 5-year-old kid. But she's my daughter, so I simply assumed that she made it up. Naive of me, I know. I forgot all about it. As the cycle of buying knives only for them to be taken away continued, it was annoying, but it wasn't scary, by any stretch. Hell, if that's what all this amounted to, you wouldn't be reading this. It would be a strange phenomenon of a young girl imagining a friend for her to play with. A few times within about a week, I tried to get my daughter to explain about the knives. I mean, seriously, it wasn't funny at this point. I was starting to get pissed. But one day, I'd say about 7 months later, shit hit the fan. Pretty much, I was relaxing in my room watching TV per usual. At that point, I heard a scream. I thought it was the show at first, but then I realized something. It sounded like my daughter's scream. I went upstairs in a hurry, just to find a gruesome scene. As you can guess, my daughter was stabbed with the knives. All of them. And I mean all of them. Just hundreds of knives. Sticking out of her, blood was pouring out, staining the carpet. Her organs were spilling out. Every bone was visible and her skin was torn clean off, and not an inch of flesh remained. Now, I was looking around like crazy at this point. I could have sworn if there was some bastard in there who was lying with my knives, ready to kill my daughter, I might have seen him. I didn't see anywhere he could have hid. We haven't found the guy to this day. And what's worse was on the walls. Don't go after me. Don't return there. I didn't do it. I swear, guys, I'm not crazy. After the incident, I was framed, naturally. I was the only one at home. The knives had no DNA except for mine and hers. My wife divorced me. She thought I did it. I didn't. Someone out there did, though. Some sick bastard ruined my life and my family. And someday, I'll make that wicked bastard pay. While enforcing the law for as long as I have, specifically around a decade or so, you'll see some strange things, whatever it be. Horrific, like the time my daughter was murdered with my weapons, or anything else. It's a wild ride to be sure. Stranger still, if you're patrolling the area that I have. See, I patrol a small place in Texas, and within that area is an even smaller area. An area that would happen to be a road. A roadway, really. A shortcut that normally many people use. However, this place has a reputation for housing odd, mysterious, and sometimes crazy. This little roadway is known as Harmony Way. It's that one special place, central to all conspiracy theories. Now, as I mentioned, this is a small area. And I'm talking teensy-weensy small. So small, I'm pretty sure nobody's ever heard of it except for the folk around here. Well, I guess, until now. See, as of late, the town folks have been getting anxious. They're starting to tell stories about Harmony Way. Experiences. So I thought to myself, why not tell a few of my own? After all, Harmony Way is the place where absolutely anything can happen. And, well, absolutely anything does happen. Now, I probably won't begin describing all the goings-on in the area, but I can at least fit in what I remember. Story 1. The Deer Crash. So, this was one of my first days on the job. I was pretty nervous, and I was with my partner, Chris Granite, who was pretty friendly, although rough and serious. Before I go any further, I should probably tell you that this is one of the least scary stories I've experienced. But it's the first run-in I've had with the paranormal in the area. So, I was patrolling the road. Yes, that road. And I happened to find a deer. I was observing the deer, just minding its own business on the road. And then a car came by. It was speeding, way past the limit. It was about to hit the deer. And then the deer simply stayed still. The car was the one that was damaged. Thankfully, the driver was fine. And due to the accident at hand, I let him loose with a $100 fine so he could pay for his damages. I got reprimanded for this error later. Yo, Charles, what the hell? What? The guy crashed into the deer, and it was perfectly fine. Yeah, odd shit happens. Welcome to Harmony Way. The guy knew what he was getting into. Speeding in Harmony Way of all places? Besides, we don't give tickets around here for speeding. We don't? Nah, not on Harmony Way. Anyway, there's sort of an unspoken rule for that particular street. Namely, if strange shit happens on Harmony Way, and a person is harmed from it, even if they were engaging in small-time illegal activities like speeding and texting and driving or something like that, well, we pardon it, since said paranormal experience is usually penance enough. So what, this stuff is on our side? He chuckled a bit, as if I had said something dumb. Charles, there's a lot you've got to learn. The things in this area, it doesn't take sides. It's not good or bad. It just is. It's like nature. In a weird way, nature isn't inherently good or inherently evil. It's just neutral in this game of life, you know? Yeah. After that, nothing else really happened around there. We packed up and went home. Story 2. The Human Bird. This was another relatively harmless experiment. So, I was in my second week of patrolling the area. After a bit, I was finally tasked with patrolling Harmony Way again with Chris. We were just recovering from an experience with a missing kid in the forest, but, that's for another day. So, it was a few hours of boredom, except for some speeders, a bit of cloud watching, the whole, that cloud looks like Texas type of thing, when we were about to give up, and we saw something in the sky. A bird. Now you may be thinking, Charles, why are you talking about a bird? I thought this was our no sleep, not our snooze time. Downvote. Well, here's one little tiny detail about this particular bird. It had a face. And not just any face. This particular face was the face of my mother, who's been dead for 10 years of Alzheimer's. Now, I'm no genius, but shouldn't that be impossible? I look at Chris, confused. He nods. Let me guess, you know the face on that bird? I look at him in shock. How do you even know that? And why does that bird even have a face to begin with? Never mind my own mother's. Like I told you before, strange shit happens here. One day it's Elvis's ghost, another you get transported to another dimension for a few seconds. That's why we're here, to make sure people stay safe and don't end up dead. Dead? People die here? A brief pause. Anyway, that cloud over there looks like a donut, doesn't it? Story number 3, my own doppelganger. Well, this marks the 4th time I've been on Harmony Way. 3rd time didn't really give me anything new. But the 4th time, oh lord. I mentioned Harmony Way gets scary. Well, this is my earliest experience of the true horrors of Harmony Way. I was patrolling the area, as usual, stopping speeders, keeping the streets safer than they would be. Although it's still relatively unsafe. I turned to Chris. Chris, I've been wondering. Yes? Well, so far things haven't been very dangerous. You mentioned people dying. New topic. How's your day so far, Charles? No, I'm serious. Why isn't anything terrible happening? No demonic possessions? Chris looked at me and leaned over to me. Charles, you don't want to talk about this crap right now. Not in the middle of the street. Why? I think it has its own consciousness. It can hear us as long as we're in it. We found this out through experimentation. Oh. Well, seeing the anomalies happening so far, I wouldn't be surprised. And it didn't see you as a threat, to answer your question. How so? First thing to know, the more you know about Harmony Way, the more dangerous it gets. Once again, it's been done through HQ experimentation. Just make sure to look the other way and you won't be in for much. I nod slowly. Makes sense after all. If this thing has a consciousness, it would be able to hear us, right? I don't inquire anymore. Not because there weren't a million questions running through my head. After all, anyone working in this particular area is bound to drown in questions surrounding these anomalies. But rather, I saw something. Myself. Specifically, it was walking across the street. There were a few differences, though. Firstly, the eyes were black. And I mean cold black. As in, doesn't reflect any light. I'd describe it as Vanada black. That one shade of black that doesn't reflect any light. You've seen those articles, right? This discovery was partly from this, but that's another story. Second, it was way too tall. I'm talking super tall and skeletal. Easily 10 feet high. Lastly, it was twitching. Very much so. Well, that wasn't the last thing. I lied. The last one came when it spoke. What are you doing here? Come with me. I have safety from the end. It was a distorted voice. It was like different audio clips all attached together to form a sentence. Something seemed suspicious. Then Charles declares, "Pleasure of a day it's been." The being hissed and got on all fours.
"I will find you eventually, and when I do, I will kill you. We must survive. Everlast."
The creature crawled away, swearing its revenge at this point. I turned to Chris and I began to ask, "What was that? What do you say? How do you possibly know?" Look, if you think this is the first time we've ever encountered one of these doppelgangers, you're terribly mistaken. Here's a fact. They're incredibly common, but that doesn't mean they're not dangerous. He began to pack up. Don't let them touch you. Otherwise, you'd turn into a pile of boils and flesh. Then, you'd have to be put in the Foundation's hands, and trust me, you don't want that. He packs up his things. After I asked him where he's going, he said he had to report the incident to the Foundation, and that it was best that I went home for the day. Story 4. 1 billion hands. So, I was patrolling for about a month now. Now, there was more paranormal shit going on, but it was mostly harmless stuff. Chris came out about an hour early, said there was a Foundation meeting. Although he isn't technically part of the Foundation, he merely reports to the officers. According to Chris, there are guys researching Harmony Way. I didn't know much about them at the time though. So his car came over in the parking lot. Then, suddenly, it crashed. I saw a hand reach up and grab the tire, poking multiple holes in it. I looked down to see more hands reaching up to grab me. I barely stepped out of the way before they could touch me with their claws, doing who knows what to me. So, I kept going across the entire road on my 2 bare feet. In hindsight, I should have gone for the vehicle immediately, but I was a dumb 20-something. It's not like I knew any better. So I kept going on my own 2 feet, still running from the hands on the ground. Then the worst thing possible happened. Some guy, clearly looking for an adventure to brag to his friends about, walking on the side of the road. Christ. The imagery. I saw the hands grab this poor guy, squeezing him tight. The muscles were visible as he was getting squeezed. All of his innards were exposed as his leg kept getting squeezed tighter and tighter. And then, the boils began. They started to form absolutely everywhere on him, as the thing, thankfully, starts to let go. Soon enough, he became a blob of skin, muscles, and boil. As the arm started to go into the background, Kurtz came up and marveled at the mess that was left behind. Yeesh, I remember my first time seeing the handies get their victims. Probably the single moment I realized. Then he put his hand on my shoulder. This isn't going to be one of those jobs you simply quit. We're here for a reason, and we're here to stay. This is going to stay with us forever, probably. Pack your stuff. We're going to the Foundation. Thanks for all the support in the last entry. I'm really glad everyone enjoyed part 1 of my adventures in Harmony Way, and I'm looking forward to showing you more. You know, it's funny. I may have been put in life-endangering situations in the past, but now I can look back on them with this strange sense of nostalgia. Story 1, The Foundation. The first story is a continuation of my last one. You know, when Chris was telling me to head to the Foundation and all, this isn't really all that scary. The Foundation itself did get really scary though, as things went on for the decade I've worked there. So, I entered the Foundation building. I look around and I saw a white room, and men running to and from. There were many, many rooms. Before I could go any further, Chris pulled me to a desk with a stereotypical secretary-looking lady. "Hey there, officers Red Spitting and White Lip. You here to file a report?" I looked at Chris strangely. Before I could ask, he turned to me. "We don't use real names. We're assigned names, specifically names related to snakes." I nod slowly. "Ah, okay." Chris turns back to the secretary lady. "So, anyway, we're here to report a D/127 class anomaly, which activated an A2 class scenario. I am pleased to report there were no A1 class scenarios, however." I look at him oddly for a few seconds before putting my thoughts into words. "What?" He nodded understandingly and explained, "It's code speak for a doppelganger turned a civilian to mush and no other civilian saw it happen." I nodded and looked back at the secretary. She looked at me and replied, "Ah, I must have forgotten. I'm Operative Garden, but you can call me Sheila." I replied, "I'm Red Spitter." Chris interrupts me. "I'm Red Spitter. You're White Lip." "Ah, well, I'm White Mouth. You can call me Charles." Chris replies, "No, she can't. And you can't call her by her real name either. It's Foundation policy." I threw my hands up in the air. "Whatever." Chris told Garden, "Report the incident to the Overseer." "Will do, Red Spitter. See you later, White Mouth." I waved back at her before Chris pulled me and pushed me out the door, as he went with me. Yeah, he can be a hard ass like that, but it's part of what I like about the guy. Story 2, Return of the Deer. So, as corny as it sounds, the deer had returned that day. It always returns every time I'm here. Chris says it's always there, every day, at the exact same time, 9 a.m. I saw the deer there. It was looking directly at me, with its red, beady eyes. So I asked Chris, "Does it hurt anyone?" "Well, it's 50-50. 50-50? How does the deer murder people?" "Trust me, when you've been here long enough, you come to despise the fuck out of that deer." "Then why don't we hunt it down? You know, shoot it or whatever." "We tried. Bullets bounce off toward the people who shot the bullet." "So it kills the shooter?" "Yep, it's also carnivorous." As he said that, it reached down and ate a bunch of rabbits and swallowed them whole. I swear I saw its teeth get sharp. As the purple crescent on its head started to glow, it walked away on all fours and vanished into midair. Chris turned to me and said, "Yeah, it does that. If I were you, I'd get used to it and not get too close." Story number 3, The Little Kid. Now, if you're anything like me, you find little kids scary. That feeling only increased after this experience. So, it's been a few months since I've joined the police force and the first story occurred. I had done my fair share trying to track down missing kids, but this one had to be one of the most frightening. See, this was a family who lost their 3 children a few years back. Supposedly, there is an ongoing investigation to find the children. Key word there being supposedly. He pulled me to the side and explained, "Listen, Charles, in October, there's unusually high amount of kids going missing, almost triple the norm. The reason we don't explain this phenomenon is we know what's making them all disappear." I tilt my head in confusion. "If you know so much, why don't you go after it?" "It's not that simple. It's an anomaly. The nature of the anomaly is unknown, but we gave it a D98 class rating. Thus, the disappearances aren't a police matter. They're a Foundation matter. They've been hunting this thing for years, but so far it's a no-go. Right now, we gotta pay lip service to the family, and then watch this Halloween for any phenomenon. Got it?" I nod slowly. He nods. "And don't be a hero either. Every new officer tries to be a hero the first Halloween, and every year, they just barely make it out alive. If at all. So, if not for your sake, don't die for my sake." I nod and he knocks on the door. An elderly woman and her husband came out. The woman sobbed on my shoulder and Chris shook the husband's hand. Then Chris said, "We've been making strides to try to find the monster." He looks at me. "Responsible for this." The woman looked at Chris. "Thank you. I'm sure that you'll get him. You have to." Chris replies, "We will most certainly try." With that, the two of us went off. We looked around for a bit, first down the street, then in the woods. This was when we found something. There was a clearing about 10 feet wide with a large circle of nothing but dirt. And then I turned around and saw a little kid. It wasn't the kid we were looking for, but it did fit the bill for another kid. I told you, there were a lot of missing children. So naturally, I go to talk to it. And Chris put his hand on my shoulder. "Don't be a hero, Charles." I looked at the kid and asked for him to speak. Chris started to yell, "Charles, you don't want to."
You are Here?
It sounded distorted, like it was multiple tapes all modified to look and sound like they were from the same clip, but it failed horribly. Either way, we decided to run. But I swear, when I turned around slightly, I saw a large gray blur charging towards me. I saw lots of teeth too, lots of sharp ones, and there were legs all crawling towards us. Other than that, the creature was way too fast to see. Afterward, it was a sharp sting, the deepest pain I've ever felt. Then I blacked out. I woke up in the foundation with a deep gash in my stomach. Chris and Sheila were looking over me on my hospital bed. So were a few men in lab coats with blank white masks. As in, all white. I don't know how they could even see out of it. God, White Lip, you had me worried. I told you not to be a hero. Not to talk to that thing. Not when you're in its territory anyway. Sheila added, I was worried. So scared you wouldn't wake up. And with that, she stroked my cheek a little bit. It tickled somewhat. I looked up at her and smiled. Chris put his hand on my shoulder and said, Garter and I will head back to the main desk to report what happened. You heal up. This could be a while. As they walked out the door, I started my 3 months of hospitality. Turns out there was poison in my system. When I did get out, I learned caution. Caution would aid me in my travels. Because, oh boy, things did not get any better from here. Well, I must thank everyone for the support once again. It means so much that people are willing to read the stories from little old me. Keyword here being old. I am in my mid-60s after all as I'm typing this. But this isn't about me. It's about my experiences. The things I've been through in my job. So, in that case, let's get going, shall we? Story 1. The Lights in the Sky. So, it's been about a year now. I've gone through my life's share of terrible monsters and ghouls, but if I were to tell you about each and every single one of them, we'd be here all day. And this would be a 200-part story. Now, I don't want that, and probably neither do you. But needless to say, I didn't find anything else out about the Foundation. During that time, one mission I had was to find info about the Foundation. After all, when in the vicinity of such a strange organization, how could you not? In the meantime, I've been getting close to Sheila. Not using her for info, as she knows just about as much as I do, but in a way that I don't get close to most people. But this isn't about that. Although, I was pressing Chris on the matter. Chris, I've been wondering. Yeah, bud? Are you part of the Foundation? Nah, I just take orders from them, and then I report to Gardner about the incidents I find. Fact, I've never met anyone besides her who works there. I've never been anywhere in the facility that isn't the hospital or a meeting room. The only thing I know that you don't is the coding. Not true. I've been brushing up on my code lingo. A class is civilian, B is staff, C class is Harmony Way, D class are the anomalies, and E class is leakage and whistleblowers, right? Yeah, you forgot I class though. What about F through H class? There is no F class. G and H class are for high-ranking employees only. I class is in case a D class ends up breaking into or out of the facility. Out? Oh, yeah, out. Second thing to know about these guys, they have some D-class anomalies for studying. Isn't putting D-class and anomaly together redundant? They're the same thing. It's like saying toast-type burnt bread. It's the same thing. Yeah, but it's required. Foundation policy, for some reason. Fair. Eventually, as we were watching over the road, we saw it. A bright light shining above in the skylight. I tell Chris, I didn't think airplanes flew over here. He replies, firstly, they do. Rarely, but they do. Secondly, those aren't airplanes. Notice how they're still. I look once again and sure enough, the light was still. Suddenly, there were two. Don't look for too long. It's an invitation. For what? Well, you get boarded onto an alien spacecraft for them to experiment on you and place some sort of chip and vaccine in you. They say it's immunity from the great disease or some shit. We know this because of the subjects brave enough to go through with the trial. I asked, just out of curiosity, what happens to the subject afterwards? He leans over and whispers, "They supposedly retire with a good financial reward, enough so they don't have to work again. Granted, they sign a license saying they'll keep mum." I nod slowly, wondering more and more about this facility, and what it has to hold. He leans over and whispers, "At least that's what I've heard. I've had my doubts." I nod slowly. Story 2. The Foundation, an Investigation. So, ever since I've heard that, I've been more and more invested in figuring out the goings-on of the facility, and I've been planning a little sneak-in, alongside a friend of mine. "So, you sure it's today?" Sheila asked. "For sure," I replied, as we both head over to the party store. "If we're going to enter the facility, we'll need a disguise. We're going shopping for lab coats." I look at Sheila. "So, if you didn't have the job at the Foundation, where would you be?" I asked in a whisper. She replied, whispering back, "Don't know. I got looped up in all the Foundation stuff because I was always curious about the happenings of Harmony Way. After all, my dad was a Harmony Spelunker." In case you didn't know, a Harmony Spelunker is someone who frequents Harmony Way in order to figure out the mysteries behind it. She continued, "But one day, he just didn't come back. No wreckage, nothing. Just gone. Ever since, I wanted to figure out what happened." I asked her, "What do you think it was?" I saw her tear up. If you don't want to answer, you don't need to," I added. No, it's fine. It's just, Harmony Way isn't the only mysterious factor in the area, and certainly not the only malicious one." I asked her, "What's the other?" She replied, "What I think? Don't tell anyone I said this, but personally, I think he got caught by the Foundation." I ask, "That's why you're doing this, isn't it? You want to know what happened to your father?" She nodded slowly. Changing the subject, I asked, "If you had a kid, what would you name it?" Sheila looked up. "I've always wanted a daughter named Cecile." I smile and nod. "Cecile. That's a beautiful name." After we got our disguises, I start to drive to the entrance of the facility. But she comments that we're supposed to go to the opposite way than usual, pretty much behind Harmony Way. Once we get there, she pointed out a secret entrance inside Sandy Hill. We both went in with our disguises on. The first thing we saw was a large room and an elevator door. Above that was a display that read out the latest news and incidents. Mainly, they were classes of incidents that I haven't heard of. G, H, I, all the way down to Z. Incidents, whatever those were. Anyway, there was nothing else there. Not even Sheila knew what they were. So we went onto the elevator. There was a slot for some kind of key, and the buttons for each of the doors weren't lit up. We tried pressing them, but it was no use. "I think we need some kind of key," I muttered. "Maybe we can get a key from one of the officers?" I nod to myself, and then realize that's why there aren't any security at the front door. If you don't have a key, you're not going to get anywhere. They can show everyone to the news, and no one's going to understand anyway. Hell, I'm an officer and I only know up to E. I'm an employee of this place. I know up to E, then G, and H. G and H. G-class incidents are relating to experiments, as to whether they succeed or not. H-class is whatever my dad was. Your dad? What did he say about it? He didn't know. All he said was H-class personnel, and he didn't tell me what it was. So he worked there? I think. I told her I'll be right back, and I went to go get one of the scientists and tell them that I needed something. "Sure, man, but I'm only an intern. I only have access to levels 1 and 2. You know, the need-to-know basis of this place." "Yeah, that's the question." I pulled him outside, then knocked him out and took the key from his pocket. Went back to the elevator, and sure enough, the buttons for 1 and 2 lit up. "I've been on 1 before. My first day. It's just paperwork and applications. Try 2. I pressed 2 and we went down to the floor. It's a subject training academy, as the sign says. This is where the subjects are. There was a large sign that said 5-minute break. Thus, the subjects were all in the court. I turned to Sheila. "We can interrogate them." "How?" I reply. "I'm a police officer. It's kind of my thing." So we went up to one of the subjects and asked, "Hey, how did you get here?" The subject, wearing a white mask with a smiley face, looked at me. With a distorted voice, he replies, "See, I was dirt poor. Then this guy came up. A guy named Philip. He said he had a job for me. A job that would pay a lot. So I accepted. I don't even know anything about this place. Just that I'm Class H personnel and that everyone listens to the overseer." I look and then I go to Sheila. He's Class H. Like my dad. This means that your dad is a... Before I could finish, the guy wearing the disguise as well as multiple armed guards all came into the room. "There's one of the officers," he yells. "That's the one that beat me up." The officers, without a word, all aimed their rifles at us. But before they could shoot, they were all shot in the back, cracking their armor. They turned around to see who shot them, but they were gone. We took the opportunity to get up the elevator and go. As we run to the elevator, I saw another officer. He leaned to us and muttered, "You're welcome, Charles." I looked at him and said, "Chris?" He simply nodded. "Yeah, I saw both you guys in the car headed here. I knew it was no good, so I followed." "And you didn't rat us out?" "Nah, started to get annoyed by these guys anyway. They don't even care about us. We're just a pawn in their larger game. And so are you, Sheila. We all are. Even the guys who try to kill you guys. They're just taking orders, in fear of a larger enemy." He looked down and finished, "In fear of the overseer. And even then, I'm not entirely certain he's the head honcho of all of it. Or if it goes any deeper than that." We leave the elevator and quickly escape, ditching our disguises and heading back to the car, rushing home before they could track us. Story 3. The Vision. Chris and I were on our first job since the incident at the Foundation. Truth is, we weren't called back for a while. We were stressed out, but apparently Sheila said that's not kind of a big thing. We didn't find any valuable information after all. But Sheila has been digging up into her father's history. She's doing more underground work. Meanwhile, our jobs are so much more mundane. That is, until a few hours in. I blinked and suddenly the world around me shifted. Weird blue bubbles appeared everywhere, blue string attached to them. I turned to see Chris, but he was little more than a husk of his former self, covered in bubbles and strings. He muttered,
"Everlast, everlast, beware of the great virus."
I blinked again and the world returned to normal. I turned to Chris and said, "Hey, why were you a weird zombie thing?" Chris replies, "It's a D4 incident. Sometimes it happens to me." I just blinked to escape, but other officers in the past weren't so lucky. They never came back. Thankfully, you only disappeared for a minute. Story 4. More deer shit. So yeah, you read the title. The deer did something even bigger than last time. So we saw yet another spelunker slowly driving through Harmony Way. I was about to stop him, but then I saw the deer. I heeded Chris's warning and backed up. It looked at the passenger. Then I noticed its head starting to twist. This thing was twisting rapidly, more rapidly than I've ever seen anything move before. And then it leapt onto the car door, phased through the door, and ate the guy. I'm talking gobbled the guy up until there was nothing left, not even bloodstains. The worst part is, it ate the non-vitals first, so the guy was still alive when it finally finished him off. Dear God, that thing is vicious. After that, it phased back through the door and vanished into midair to God knows where. That vision gave me nightmares for the next few days. Story number 5. The truth behind Harmony Way. So, after the incident, Chris and I were walking the area, patrolling. After that, we reported the incident to Sheila. So, Chris, it seems like we're not really needed in this area. You sure it's to patrol? Nothing bad really goes on here. You're thinking too critically. I've had my suspicions for a long time before you came here. As we were walking, another passenger came by. Chris continued. One civilian dying, one after another. On the hill, a portal appeared. Just like this. This guy's going to die. No matter how fast he goes, they always catch up. Harmony Way always catches up.
It's sickening, you know? A tentacle appeared out of the portal. I signed up to protect people. The tentacle grabbed the car. But we can't do anything against these things. Or something happens. I'm not quite sure, but the last time a partner of mine was killed by one of the anomalies. We could see the guy in the car screaming. He tried to get out, but the tentacle was in the way. Well, the next day, we never saw him again. He vanished without a trace. Just like Sheila's dad. Exactly. You want to know my hypothesis? My explanation for all of this? The tentacle pulled the guy into the portal and closed. Truth is, my friend, if the authorities here gave two shits about people and their safety, they would have put up a ban from entering the area. Claimed it was dangerous, or that some serial killer was on the loose or something. But they're not, because they're in bed with the Foundation. A tear formed in his eye. Truth is, Charles, those guys in the Foundation aren't the only test subjects. They're just D-class subjects. But we're also subjects, and so are they. And all the casualties, all these deaths, they're just experiments. So they won't ever shut this place down. Because to them, we're not people. We're not even police officers. We're lab rats. And so are the civilians. We're all supposed to die eventually. It's Foundation policy. Well, guys, we did it again. I was worried part 3 would suck, but you guys did it. Once again, you guys gave me the support to continue. Dear Lord. So, about the other few posts. I am aiming for 5 installments. I've always liked the number 5. I don't know why, I just do. But anyway, that's not what I'm here for. I'm here to tell you a story. Now, this part is where things get interesting. You know, as if things weren't interesting already. Story number 1. The meeting. This isn't going to be a story about anomalies. Sorry for the disappointment. But you guys seem interested in the Foundation and that sort of thing. So, this is just a closing to that aspect. So, this takes place a few years from the original story. 5 years since I've signed up to be a cop, to be exact. Including marriage. So, I was getting ready to head out when my wife called me. Yeah, Sheila? We need to talk. I went over to speak to Sheila. Truthfully, we've been trying to find out secrets of the Foundation for a while. You know, espionage and all that. We've gotten better at it. But what she said shook me to the core. I got an email from someone, she muttered. What does it say? It was a file. A file? It was a file regarding my father. And it said this. Hello there. You may be wondering what this is. This is about your father. Specifically, his fate. No, you may be wondering who I am. All I will say is that I'm close with the director. Who is the director? He's the one above the overseers. See, there are multiple overseers, one for each branch. Each branch is assigned to a different anomalous area, like Harmony Way, or the Goatman's Bridge. But there's only one director. This director is in control of the entire facility, and is the only contact with the overseer. But that's not what you're interested in, is it? No, you're interested in your father, Subject H503. He was particularly obedient, although he was only truly obedient because of the promise of his child's safety. Now, of course, this is ironic in hindsight. But the most important part is he ended up duped. See, he lived long after his disappearance. He was the subject of something important. Namely, he wasn't Class H. He was Class F. Now, the official story we give officers is there is no Class F. But why would we skip F? F is personnel that were sacrificed. Sacrificed to what, exactly? Well, that shit-eating deer. The same one we see in every anomalous zone. And yes, it's the same one. D-01. We don't know where it came from, but we know it's probably one of the most powerful anomalies out there. It's able to summon viruses at will, create new organisms from nothing. It could destroy the Harmony Way, potentially the whole world if it wanted to. Which is why we offer sacrifice. It likes to eat. It's a hungry being after all. It likes the taste of humans best. Which is why we offer it human on the 4th of every month. And this year, it was your dad. For that, I'm truly sorry. I put many people to death, and I'm making up for this now. Show the world what this twisted foundation is truly behind. I understand their intentions, and I was behind them for the longest time, but there is no other way. I will die from this. I have a bomb in my head that the director put in, set to explode on his will. He sees this now. He will probably go after you. He will put in all of his efforts into this. This is sensitive information. Maybe I'm putting another innocent to death. But if the world knows of this, he can't kill everyone. That's all I'm saying. Goodbye. The Harmony Way Overseer. After reading that, I looked at Sheila. You okay, babe? I asked. I'm better than I ever would have been. I finally have closure. That's good. I hug her, and she yells, "Careful, the baby, remember?" I nod and apologize. Story 2. The Warning. Well, I suppose I'll mention an incident that happened during the same time period. So Chris and I were out and about doing our jobs, and then we saw it. It was the same doppelganger that I saw last time.
Don't cast me away. I'm here to warn you.
I looked at Chris in confusion. He never says this. It's always scripted. The same thing he said the first time. He says every time, Chris remarked. The doppelganger replied,
I'm here to tell you, the director, he knows. He knows you snuck in and tried to get the intel, and he knows about the rituals. I'm here to say one thing. He doesn't plan to kill you. He plans to break you. He's going to kill everyone you love. Then, wait for you to find new love, so he can break you all over again, until you sacrifice yourself.
He crawled away, muttering.
That is all.
Chris looked at me and asked, The director? Long story. I felt immediately sick to my stomach. Story number 3. Loss. This must have been one of the most terrifying incidents I've ever faced. So, we were patrolling the streets. This was our 6th year at this point. I had just gotten a call from my wife about our daughter, Cecile. I looked at Chris. We were talking about Cecile. However, we saw something. Spikes. Sharp, knife-like objects reaching from the ground, circling us. Chris yelled, "What is that?" I should have known this was odd. Not even Chris knew what these things were. And frankly, neither did I. We started to run from it so we could get to our cars. We got there and started to go. As we floored the pedal, we managed to get out of Harmony Way. This thing couldn't get us anymore. Well, so we thought. Suddenly, I heard a loud scream and turned over, and I saw Chris. He had a large spike through him. It reached all the way out of his mouth from the ground. It pulled him down out of the car. I tried to chase the thing, but it was gone. Chris was gone. At least I thought, but that's for later. Chapter 4. That goddamn deer. So after that incident, I got a new partner. I was experienced enough anyway. His name was Andrew, and he was fairly hot-headed and reckless. So, when we saw the deer, Andrew thought it would be a good idea to shoot it. He raised his pistol, and I put my hand on top of it and gently put his arm down. Andrew, the first thing you know, you don't hunt things here. That's the Foundation's job. Secondly, that deer is especially dangerous. Sure enough, the deer grew wings and flew away. There it was. Symbols. Symbols for Latin, new future. As I read this, and a pat on his shoulder, remembering my first years of being an officer with Chris, I still miss him sometimes. I do. I can only hope he's up there now. But, as the deer said, as much as I hate that bastard, he's right about my new future. Well, this is it. I've got a melancholy feel about the finale. Well, more of a mixed feeling. On one hand, it's exciting to see things come to a close. But on the other, I've had fun seeing the engagements and reactions from everyone. So I'd like to say thank you for everything. From the bottom of my heart, once again, thank you. So, on to the story. Story 1. The Mimics. So, I was still mourning Chris. He was a good friend after all. He was my partner. I also lost my daughter recently in the as-of-then developing event. But in the moment, I turned around and saw Andrew investigating rocks. Rocks, Andrew? He looked up at me. You never know what you'll find. I remember how reckless I was back in my day. Fair enough. So, I kept looking. But then we were called.
Chris, Andrew, you're both called to Backstreet?
Oh yeah, I guess I'll mention that it was Halloween. So, Backstreet is where the monsters were. Another one of the paranormal hotspots. So, we go there, and like I did back in the day, Andrew was ready to hunt the monsters. I decided I'm feeling reckless, so I'll go with him. We find a little girl.
Mommy? Daddy? I need help finding my mommy, daddy. Can you help us?
I recognized the little girl. She was my 4-year-old daughter. Nonetheless, as charming and as sweet as it sounded, I knew it was a trap. My daughter was dead.
Daddy, you're here. I'm here.
No, I thought. It can't be real. I turned to see Andrew. That thing looks like my mom. It does? He looked at me with tears in his eyes. Yeah, she died last month. She was stabbed with a knife. We never found who did it. We followed the kid with images of spikes on the ground flashing up repeatedly. It showed us the circle Chris and I saw all those years ago. It turned into a massive beast and we started opening fire. The bullets just bounced off it. We immediately stopped firing once we watched the beast in horror as it relished in our fear. It stomped towards us. I turned to Andrew, who said he had an idea. Hit the human body dangling over it. I shake my head, still thinking of little Cecile's smile, now plastered on the thing. I could practically hear her giggling. I wondered for a moment if Cecile was alive and well within the thing's body, trapped inside this monstrosity. I ran away. The thing was practically taunting me. Andrew didn't stay behind either. I thought it would give me closure. Instead, I only found a reminder of what I lost. Story 2. A Little Journey. We weren't watching over Harmony Way, but at this point, it was 7 years since I first joined. Still trying to find the clues of the Sharp Man. We've been looking over every nook and cranny of the town. We were patrolling the city in our cars when we saw an old-timer car. The car was speeding, so we got out to give the guy a ticket, but when we turned around, our car was just as old and just as timey. I looked at Andrew in confusion. This happened in the stories that Chris told me, times gone past. I told Andrew, be careful. Sure enough, we look around and everything, all the cars and everything was old. We both got odd looks from civilians who were wearing older suits. As we asked around, we realized the year was 1912. We looked around to try to find the foundation. The foundation doors were locked. The building itself looked the same, but even the Harmony roadways were newer. Then I noticed some graffiti. Beware. There was more graffiti. He lives. Chris lives. Beware Z through B. Covered in spikes. Covered in blood. Watch for Sheila. Don't die. One more chance. Suddenly, the graffiti disappeared and the roads appeared the same as before. I looked at Andrew confused. The cars are back. We're back. So, I went home. It wasn't quite today. It was a few months before Cecile's death. Story number 3. The Flooding. I was setting up cameras in Cecile's room, prepared for the time that the man would strike. It was a few weeks away now. and I was setting up a plan for when he would break into my house, and I ended up getting a call from Andrew. Hey, are you at Harmony Way? Nah, I'm taking care of personal business. And I drove to Harmony Way, at least what remained of it. No longer was Harmony Way a street, it was a damn ocean. I'm talking water flooding the entire roadway, with the parking area being the only place that wasn't flooded. I called Andrew on the walkie-talkie to get me from the parking area. Charles, what the hell is this? You think I know? Yeah, but you're the one who's been here for almost 8 years. Fair, but I still don't know. And I started to drive away. What are you doing? Go get a raft. So I go to the store and get myself some raft. The flooding occurred in town too. If you were to stack 3 of me up in a row, that'd be the depth we were dealing with. I kept running and running and running, and just when I was about to get exhausted, it stopped. The water just stopped. I walked back to Andrew to see if he was okay. Flooding, Charles? What on earth do you mean? I've been waiting here for you for 2 hours. I gave up trying to explain the situation with Andrew or with anyone else. Honestly, I've just learned that Harmony Way does weird shit for no reason. This must have been one of those times. Story number 4. Almost got him. This is kinda not so much damn Harmony Way you crazy than the last one, but it's still relevant. It was the day. It was the day I almost got him. I almost got the Sharp Man. See, it was the day he got Cecile. Keywords, got Cecile. Because when it was time for him to go in, I entered the room, fully expecting him there. No one was there. Nothing. Just me and Cecile. She asks me, "Daddy, what's happening?" I turn around and replied, "Cecile, Daddy's trying to protect you." And I stood there for an hour. He was late. So I left the room. Immediately I heard a scream. I turned back to see a blur jumping out of the window, creating a large crash noise. Sure enough, Cecile was dead. I jumped out the window and shot at the figure, but he vanished into the ground. I looked around, wondering where it was. I pulled out a walkie-talkie. "Andrew."
I think I see our guy, covered in spikes.
Yeah, that's how Cecile described him in the last timeline. I jumped in my car and started heading his way.
Ah, damn it.
Are you okay, Andrew?
He got away.
I saw him approaching the car and I pulled out my gun and started to shoot. It stood still, as if taunting me, and blocked the attacks. Then it jumped onto a cliff nearby and started climbing. Andrew took out a grappling hook and hooked onto it. He pulled on it until a knife came out of the wall and cut the rope. It got away. I looked at Andrew. He said, "Don't worry, sir. We'll get him. I know it." I smiled and I said, "Yeah, for Cecile." Andrew replied, "It's not too late. He didn't get to Grandma yet. We can lay a trap for him." Story number 5. The Clown. Andrew and I were patrolling the town once again, but suddenly we saw a man with makeup approaching us. He said nothing, he just simply waved. I looked at Andrew again, who looked back at the clown and simply waved back. He put his hands out. "Shit, sorry man, we don't have any cash on us." It's true, we didn't. But as we were walking back past the clown, he simply appeared somewhere he originally wasn't. Andrew told him, "Dude, we're broke." I blinked and suddenly we appeared in the middle of a warehouse. The clown was there too. He bowed and put his hand out again. I shook it and my arm was just taken off. There wasn't even any blood. It was like taking the arm off of a Lego figure. I looked at it and screamed, but nothing came out. The clown shook his head and wagged his pointer finger. He took my arm and put it up on a hook. It was then that I noticed that there were thousands of arms on hook. Each one waved at me. I almost vomited right then and there. We blinked again and we were back on the street. My arm started to bleed and there was a ton of pain. I was taken to the hospital where I would get it stitched back together, although I still didn't have a left arm. Story number 6. One Last Try. This story takes place long after my police career. In fact, around 10 years after. Andrew was still on the force, and he was training his own apprentice. Andrew and I got together one last time to try to fight the Sharp Man. So far, he hasn't gotten my grandmother yet. I've got no doubt he's going to do it now. I looked out to the hospital we were in, an elderly lady lying in bed. There were beeping sounds and people walking around in the building. I saw a figure dashing into the walls. I aimed my pistol at it and Andrew hit my arm. "Dude, what are you doing?" I said, "Sorry, I swear I saw something." He shook his head. He said, "Quit doing that stuff, you're going to get us kicked out." Another dash from the same corner. I saw the last figure. Andrew said, "You see that?" I nodded. Sure enough, the old lady got a deep gash in her heart by the same figure. It appeared in front of us. There were knives all over it and a single red dot as an eye. We had a plan, luckily. We ran. The thing was following us as we got to Andrew's police car. We drove as the thing kept trying to attack us, knives rising up from the ground trying to take us out. As we got to Harmony Way, there was flooding. As the thing tried to jump and leap in front of us, we turned the car, so the Sharp Man would charge right into the deep blue. We thought that was the end. It wasn't. It jumped out of the ocean, rust and all. We kept driving with the thing following us. Our tires popped. Guess why? We had to get out and the thing showed its face beneath the knives. It was the face of Chris. I put a gun to his face, but the knives came back to cover it. It charged toward me and tackling me to the ground. Andrew tried to get him off of me, but to no avail. Before it could kill me, however, the face came back up. "Go! But before it kills you!" I got up and aimed a rifle at his head. It closed and opened to the knife face. I saw I had 3 rounds of bullets. I fired once, blocked. Fired twice, blocked. Andrew threw a Molotov cocktail and melted some of the leg. I used the opportunity to fire the gun and I hit him right in the face. There was a large hole in his mouth, but there was no blood. Nothing poured out. It was just a corpse reanimated from the dead. Nonetheless, the Sharp Man rattled and shaked in chaos. It broke. All the knives dropped. There must have been thousands of them, all over the ground. By the time the Foundation appeared, though, the knives were gone. Ever since that day, I've seen shadows dart past from time to time. I've woken up in a cold sweat and the occasional feeling of having somebody watching me. But, nonetheless, Sheila and I lived a happy life. We adopted another kid named Jack. He's currently off in college. Sheila is dead now, though. Not from the Sharp Man, a much more mundane, much more terrifying enemy. Alzheimer's. Andrew retired with a wife of his own, although he died of cancer. As for me, well, I'm not sure. I'm thinking of doing one more journey down Harmony Way before I head over to see Chris. As for you guys, thank you. Guys, go show some love to Mario Ouija over on Reddit for this amazing story. Make sure you like and subscribe, and head over to the Discord that will be in the description. There's also a Patreon if you guys want to go check that out. Thank you.